depth. Good morning. I'm going to ask you to turn to 2 Kings chapter 17. 2 Kings chapter 17. We are eventually going to make our way to Matthew 1, verses 1 through 17. But right now, turn to 2 Kings 17 as we begin a new topic. Not begin a new topic. We have a new topic, and it's just a one-time new topic. And it's about the exile. When do you read about the exile? If I had the chart up here that Shane uses, and he gives us the different periods of time, it would be during the time of the exile. That's when it happened. I'm going to throw some dates up here. So 2 Kings 17 is where we're going to start, but I'm going to throw some dates up here, and at the end of class, I'm going to ask each of you to fill out a piece of paper that I'll give you, and you put in the dates. How does that sound? Yeah, this will definitely be a one-off class. We just finished Philippians. We had a wonderful time in Philippians, but we had a couple Sundays left. Next Sunday, Larry is going to be teaching. He's going to be teaching 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. I guess I should say Titus, 1st and 2nd Timothy, because he's going to start with Titus. But right now, we're going to have this one-off class. I do have a 2-page lesson in the back, and it's simply called The End of the Exile. And the passage we're going to talk about is Matthew 1, verse 17. Matthew 1, 1 through 17. We'll get to that here in just a moment. So all these dates that we have here, I would say they are really important dates. You need to know what they are and what's going on here. 722 BC is when Israel was exiled. Tell me this, who defeated them? Who carried Israel off into into captivity? See, there you go. I was testing you. Who carried them off into captivity? No, the northern kingdom of Israel. Assyria. If I had room, I guess I would have put Israel exiled by Assyria. Actually, I thought I did, but I guess I didn't. That was in 722 BC. And that is in 2 Kings 17, where I asked you to turn, if you want to read with me here, verses 5 and 6. Then the king of Assyria invaded the entire land and for 3 years besieged the city of Samaria. What's so significant about Samaria in terms of Israel, the northern kingdom? It's the capital. It'd be like besieging, I guess, Washington, D.C., which is kind of going on right now, isn't it? Finally, in the 9th year of King Hoshea's reign, that's the last king of the northern kingdom, Samaria fell. Listen to this. And the people of Israel were exiled to Assyria with a lot of other nations. Assyria, as you well know, was particularly cruel. When you heard that the Assyrians are coming, not to be confused with Syria, but the Assyrians, they're coming, that just made people terrified. Do you remember, I know other Bible class teachers have talked about this too, what was some of the forms of punishment? What is it the Assyrians did to their captives as they conquered a city?
Well, it says rape and murder, but I had heard that they even tore them apart.
Oof. They perfected the art of impaling, which Babylon also worked on too. Just horrible. So this is what you had, and I'm confident this is review. This is something, oh yeah, I know this already. But you've got the southern kingdom of Judah, as we call it, that purple area right there, the southern kingdom of Judah. Where are we going? There's Judah, the northern kingdom of Israel, and they're just happy-dory, happy-go-lucky. They are independent. A king directly related to David sits on the southern kingdom's throne. Israel didn't have Davidic kings, and when Assyria took them captive, did they ever return? You might hear the expression, the lost 10 tribes of Israel. People lost their tribal ancestry, their tribal identity. Occasionally you'll see somebody and they say, oh, he's of the tribe of Simeon or something like that in the New Testament. That's very rare. There's always going to be stragglers. This is what happened. Assyria comes in, they deport most of the Israelites. They name the new Assyrian province after the capital, Samaria. And there are some Jews still living there. The poorest of the poor are left behind. Then people from other nations are brought in to Samaria, and they intermarry with them, and they become their own people. And we know them as the New Testament calls them the Samaritans. So they are half-breed Jews. But you look at Judah, is it now independent? It hasn't been destroyed in 722 BC, but is it independent? Is it able to say, we are a sovereign nation? They are now an Assyrian province. And Tiglath-Pileser III threatens them. He wants to destroy the southern kingdom of Judah, but good King Hezekiah prayed to God, and the Lord helped out, didn't he? Killed 186,000 soldiers in one night, one angel. But eventually they are destroyed. Why? Why was the northern kingdom destroyed? Idolatry. Why was the southern kingdom destroyed? Idolatry. Now, there are other reasons, of course. But 2 Kings 17 is the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722. 2 Kings 24 is the fall of the southern kingdom. Now, we're talking about the end of the exile. Well, this is the beginning of the exile. And there were 3 deportations to Babylon. The third and final is in 586. That's when the temple is destroyed. So Assyria is gone bye-bye, 609 BC. King Nebuchadnezzar starts a series of deportations of Judah, 605, 597, 586 BC. And look what it says. The treasure from the Lord's temple and the royal palace are carried off to Babylon. The gold objects that King Solomon of Israel had placed in the temple. This was the glorious, beautiful Solomonic temple, and it is now dust, completely destroyed. There will be a second temple, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So I want us to look at the scriptures from the Old Testament, the scriptures that the exiled people read, and especially when we get to the prophets. But Nebuchadnezzar took all of Jerusalem captive. They are now captives. They are exiles, and they are scattered throughout the Babylonian Empire. And the land of Judea is just pretty much left behind. Jeremiah 29. Jeremiah, what is Jeremiah's relation with the captivity? He was a prophet during the captivity and after the fallout. He was there. And he's telling Judah at the time, he's telling the Judahites, listen, you're going to go into Babylonian captivity. It's going to happen. Nebuchadnezzar's going to win. You had the opposite of Jeremiah, false prophets who said, peace, peace, there's nothing wrong. This is all going to work out fine. Which set of prophets, Jeremiah or the false prophets? Which do you think were more popular? You know, when they did the polls, like they do today, the Democrats and the Republicans, they had Jeremiah and the false prophets, and you've got this guy on TV saying, Jeremiah, his approval rate is just in the tank. It's like 14%. And you got all these other people who we love these prophets. Who do you think the kings, the wicked kings of the southern kingdom loved? The false prophets. They persecuted Jeremiah. You know all of that. Here is verse 1 of Jeremiah 29. Jeremiah 29 is called the letter to the exiles. It hasn't even happened yet. And he's writing to them, these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem to the surviving elders of the exiles and to the priests, the prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had taken into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Verse 10, for thus says the Lord, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will visit you, and I will fulfill to you my promise and bring you back to this place. So Jeremiah is writing to the exiles. I said it hadn't happened yet. That's true of Isaiah, but not Jeremiah. So Jeremiah is writing to the people who are in exile. He's still back home. He's writing to them, and he says, this is going to end in 70 years. Verse 11, why is God going to bring them back? Well, because I have plans for you. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. All right, here's verse 12 on the screen. In those days when you pray, I will listen. If you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. I will be found by you, says the Lord. I will end your captivity and restore your fortunes. I will gather you out of the nations where I sent you and will bring you home again to your land. You notice what God says there? I sent you, but I'm going to bring you back. What would Nebuchadnezzar say? No. It wasn't the Lord who conquered Judah. I did. And Daniel has some interactions with Nebuchadnezzar and has to correct him on some of those misunderstandings, that he's in control. Who's in control? God is. Even when Israel's going into captivity, God's in control. They sinned. They did not heed calls to repent, and they went into exile. I'm just trying to emphasize that. All right, jump ahead now. You've got Babylon defeated by the Persians, namely Cyrus the Great. And he reverses the policy of deportation. Not only that, he finances nations returning back home. He lets them go back home and rebuild their temples, rebuild their cities. Why? Why does Cyrus the Great do this? Because he's just a great guy? He's just so loving and so nice? No. We've talked about this before. He wants their taxes. He thinks it's better to send them back home and let them levy taxes on them as he builds his empire, and it works really well. We're not going to get into a whole lot of history here. This is pretty much where we're going to stop, except to talk about the return. Now, I'm excited because Rob Perkins is going to be going through Ezra and Nehemiah next quarter, September, October, November, on Sunday nights. And he's going to be talking about Ezra chapters 1 through 6, which tell us about the return under the leadership of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel. That sounds like a foreign name, doesn't it? Yeah, it's not a Jewish name, but he is the one who leads the people, and eventually in 516 BC, they rebuild the temple. This is the second temple. And when they rebuild it, I'll just pluck this verse out of Ezra 3, verse 12. Do you remember this? That many of the older priests and Levites, a lot of the older people, so they're going to be 70-ish, 80 years old now. They remember the first temple. And when they saw the completion of the second temple, they cried. They cried and cried. But the young people, when they saw the temple, they cried too. Just for two different reasons. Why did the young people cry? Yay! Yay, look at the temple. We rebuilt it. Why are the older people crying? They remember the Solomonic temple. And they say, this pales in comparison. All right, I'm going to put a verse on the screen. I'm going to take away 539 and 538. I'm just going to put this on the screen. I want you to tell me what you see here. What do you see here? Anything? All right, 586 minus 516 is what? 70 years. So from the time of the third deportation to Babylon to the year that the temple was rebuilt, just happens to be 70 years. Now, I don't know if God is saying in exactly 70 years necessarily. You got to rebuild the temple. It took them 4 or 5 years to build the temple, 520 to 516 BC. But isn't that interesting? Now, these are some of the closing verses of 2 Chronicles. The land finally enjoyed its Sabbath rest, because people were ignoring the Sabbath, lying fallow, desolate, until 70 years were fulfilled, just as the prophet had said. What prophet? Jeremiah. And the captivity comes to an end. You have Persia, Cyrus the Great letting the people come back home, and everybody living throughout the Babylonian Empire who are Jewish, they say, let's go back to the ruined, fallow, desolate city of Jerusalem and live there. A lot of them, most of them, did not leave. This is 2-3 generations of people living in Babylon and thereabouts. By the way, Zerubbabel, two things about Ezra 1 through 6. You could take the book of Esther and put it between Ezra 6 and 7, and that's where it fits chronologically. That's where that goes, and Rob will talk more about all of that. We already studied the book of Esther. Well, now we'll have it in its historical context. Zerubbabel is himself a direct descendant of David. Does that make him king? Does that make him the Messiah? Well, no, because this is an earthly kingdom and they are not sovereign. They are under the thumb, they are a vassal of Persia, the Medo-Persian Empire. Zerubbabel was a direct descendant of David. That's interesting, that's important, but he is not the fulfillment of prophecies that were started by Isaiah talking about the future Messiah. All right, you do have Ezra come, and he doesn't rebuild the wall. What does he do? He doesn't rebuild the people, the city physically so much as spiritually. He was a scribe. He got people's noses back in their Bibles. And then here comes Nehemiah, and what does Nehemiah do? He rebuilds the wall. And I've got the New Living Translation here. They've got a date. And the Babylonians and the Persians and other nations as well during this time period, they kept very good records. And people are pretty confident. Scholars are confident that we can pick some of the days of when these things happen. October 2nd. The wall was finished, 52 days. So it took the leadership of Nehemiah to do something that they had not been able to do for almost a century, or really longer than that. 586 to 444. And all that time, they started returning around 520. So about 70 years and beyond that. 70 years plus another 70 years. So Nehemiah took care of what needed to be done and very, very quickly. All right, we're going to skip ahead to the New Testament. When Jesus is born, you look at that and say, wasn't Jesus born in 0 BC? Or 0? There's no such thing. You go from 1 BC to 180, and the guy who calculated when Jesus was born and separated Old Testament time from New Testament time, he was off by a few years. We know that because Herod the Great died in 4 BC. And how old were the Bethlehemite kids? They were 2 years old or younger. And so that means Jesus would have been about 2 years old during the Bethlehem massacre, as we call it. So Jesus was born 6 BC, thereabouts. And we come to, and I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1. I'm going to ask you, not necessarily looking for a show of hands, but how many of you have ever said, I'm going to read the New Testament? Or know somebody who said, I'm going to read the New Testament. And they start trying to read Matthew 1 through 17, and they go, you know what? I'll do it tomorrow. Hard to pronounce names. How many of you get excited when you find a genealogy in the Bible and go, woohoo, let's study this genealogy? Warning, there's a bunch of them in Ezra and Nehemiah. We'll see what Rob does with them. He'll probably do what I'll do. He'll exercise the Passover. Yeah. No, they're important. They're important. This one is especially important because it's not just simply this guy was born and he fathered this kid and he fathered this kid. You have selections of names. And you'll see in verse 17, all the generations from the first group, Abraham to David, were 14 generations. From David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. From the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. So he's got 3 sets of 14 generations. It starts by identifying Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah, the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham, is he important in the Gospel of Matthew? Is he important in Israelite history? Of course. But the focus in this genealogy is David. By the way, whose name is more prominently mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew? What do you think? Abraham or David? It's David. And most of the time it's attached to the phrase, Jesus, the son of David, have mercy on me. The son of David. Why? Why were people so excited about the son of David? I mean, he's not actually the son of David. Abraham lived about 2,000 years before Jesus. David lived 1,000 years before Jesus. He's not literally his father. He's his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson. All right, we are not going to look at all these names, I promise. But in Matthew 1, verses 2 through the first part of verse 6, do you see how it goes from Abraham to David? And if you look at the names, there is no special moniker for Abraham, for Isaac, for Jacob, Judah, Perez. There aren't any special monikers until you get to David. And what does it say about David? Jesse, the father of David, the king. Is that important? He's singling out David, isn't he? The first set of 14 names hinges on David. And then, so that's the first set. Then, when you go to the second set of 14, who does it start with? David. And it ends with not a person, but an event. Not at the end of the genealogy, but that's in there. You're exactly right. So verses 6 through 11. So what you're referring to there is David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. It doesn't even name Bathsheba. And there's something associated. There's a backstory there, of course. Solomon, the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam, the father of Abijah, Abijah, the father of Asaph, Asaph, the father of Jehoshaphat, and so on and so forth, until you get to verse 11. By the way, do you have verses 6 through 11 set off as a paragraph or some way to denote it as it's the next section? So at the end of this next section, it says, Josiah, the father of Jeconiah and his brothers, at the time of the deportation to Babylon. And after the deportation to Babylon, so he repeats the deportation to Babylon like I'm doing. You've got King David, you've got the deportation to Babylon. Is there a subtle message going on here? Or is this just simply a genealogy that Matthew threw together? Well, we know it's not because he's got a very carefully crafted genealogy of 3 sets of 14 generations. And he's mentioned King David. He's mentioned twice the deportation to Babylon. What do you think is going on here? The deportation to Babylon is over, right? They're not in exile anymore, right? They've been back home for centuries. But the third set says the deportation to Babylon, it starts with that and ends with Jesus. Were the people of Israel, when they came back to live in Jerusalem, in Judea, what the Romans later called Palestine, were they free? Were they sovereign? No. They had returned home. Did they feel like they were home? Did they ever say, I am so satisfied that I am back home and we get to do whatever we want the way we want to do it? Were they given a lot of leeway in the worship of God? Yes, they were. While other nations had to bow the knee to the gods of all, whatever nation it was, whatever peoples, the Romans, the Greeks before them, the Jews were let alone in that regard. But did they ever feel like they were really home, fully independent? They fought for that independence. You remember that date we had 444 BC for Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the wall? 6 BC. Is there a lot of history between 444 BC and the coming of Jesus? There's that whole period called the intertestamental period. And what were the Jews trying to do? They were under Greek rule. Yes, sir? They were fighting for independence. They even got it for a little while. But then they were quashed by the Romans. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, as long as it's an easy question.
At the end of verse 11, it says that, that's the end of the first 14.
Okay, the second 14.
Second 14. And then verse 12 picks up after that. So there's a gap, right?
Right.
These generations are listed till they went into deportation.
Right, but it's just 14 generations. It's not every generation.
But then, was there a gap of 70 years at some amount of time before? When this picks up, it picks up after.
Right, but there's a gap because Zerubbabel doesn't come on the scene till 520 BC, but he is named there. And notice, I'm glad you pointed out, there's Zerubbabel. There in verse 13, the guy we saw who was the governor of.
So that was part of my question. The other one is Zerubbabel was 70 years older than when.
No, there are gaps. So it's not a direct line necessarily.
Okay, so from Jeconiah to it picks up again with Jeconiah when it starts listing the third.
Right. He's one of the kings. So Zerubbabel is a direct descendant of Jeconiah. And there's debate. I'll tell you that. There's debate. What exactly, how many years are we talking about? I'll concede that. My understanding is there are gaps. Why 14? What's the significance of 14? Are you sitting down? 27? What?
Twice 7.
Okay, twice 7. Gematria, when you take the letter values and add them together, Roman numerals. I is equivalent to 1, V is equivalent to 5, X to 10. In the Hebrew language, the fourth letter in the Hebrew alphabet, Dalet, is the fourth letter. Hey, Vav. Yes, and the sixth letter is the V sound. D, and there are no vowels in Hebrew. D, V, D. 4, 6, 4. Is it possible that this is yet another layer of the genealogy in Matthew 1, 1 through 17 that is referring to David, the king? Is David really the focus, though? Who's the focus of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham, the son of David, the son of Abraham? Jesus. Does Jesus have royal blood coursing through his veins? He is a direct descendant of David. Why is that so important? Because the prophets told them there's going to be a new Davidic king who will take the throne. There's going to be a new temple. This will also entail, this true restoration will also entail the removal of sin, and there will be a resurrection. So I want to walk through these verses. These are the scriptures of the Jewish people. Isaiah 9. Isaiah is before the deportation of Babylon, but he's a prophet, and he does a lot of predicting. And here he talks about, can't get to the Isaiah, Mark. Isaiah 9 is a wonderful passage. There's a context here, but he talks about the future king, and I have verses 1 through, 1 through 3 on the screen. The land of Zebulun and Naphtali will be humbled, but there will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, of the nations, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, a light will shine. You will enlarge the nation of Israel. Whoa! We're going to go from a really weak, small nation that returned to Jerusalem and repopulated the area. But now, God, one day, when the Messiah comes, he is going to enlarge the nation of Israel, and his people will rejoice. That's the promise of the prophet. By the way, these verses are quoted in Matthew 4, verses 15 and 16. And who are they applied to? What are they applied to? The beginning of Jesus' Galilean ministry. Yes, sir.
Okay, on the genealogy, that the genealogy follows the male.
I think so. There's a debate about that too. But yes, I believe it's following Joseph.
Okay. Well, but Joseph, like you say, or I've heard many times, royal blood flows through. Okay, Joseph was not the father.
Right, but legally, they call it the legal lineage times. And so, but then you have Luke 3, which gives us what is supposed to be Mary's line. So at some point, there's a branch, and it continues down. And so Jesus is covered completely. Legally, he is the descendant of David through his adoptive father, the assumed father, Joseph. And physically, in fact, Romans 1 verse 3 just comes to mind. And I'm glad you asked that. That means people are interested in what we're talking about here. And I hope, I would love to go through this as a series with you. Verse 3, concerning his son, God made a promise concerning his son who was descended from David according to the flesh. Jesus is physically descended from Abraham, and Luke 3, which doesn't have 14 this and 14 that, it has a big long list of names going back to Adam. And Jesus is the second Adam. He's the new Adam. And Paul talks about that a lot in his letters. So I think Jesus is completely covered with his birth mother and his adoptive father. Isaiah 9 also talks about Jesus in this way. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. These are terms that apply to God, and we know them to be applied to Jesus. His government of peace will never end. They're looking for a new Davidic king. He will rule, listen to this, with fairness and justice. He will rule from the throne of his ancestor David. For how long will the child's reign last? Forever. That's what the people are reading in their Old Testaments, in their Bible, and that's what they are anticipating. Micah was a contemporary of Isaiah. They have some similar language, very, very similar language. And it's talking about Jerusalem being sieged This is long before it actually happened in 586 BC. This is in the 700s BC. They will strike Israel's leader in the face with a rod. But, verse 2, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, are only a small village among all the people of Judah, yet a ruler of Israel, whose origins are in the distant past, will come from you on my behalf. When the Magi came to Herod the Great and said, hey, we're looking for the king of the Jews who was just born, and Herod said, wait a minute, I'm the king of the Jews. What are you talking about? He didn't say that, though. And Herod turned to his scribes, and they said, oh, that's an easy one. We can tell you where he's born. Bethlehem Ephrathah. And they quoted Micah 5, verse 2. It talks about the ruler of Israel, the king of the Jews. We often just quote the first part of the verse because that's what's in Matthew 1. They are expecting a king to rule all nations. This is a really interesting passage. And Ezekiel, now Ezekiel's in the period he's in Babylon. And this is God saying through Ezekiel, I will gather the people of Israel from among the nations. We heard language like that already. I will unify them. He's going to unify the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom into one kingdom. I will unify them into one nation on the mountains of Israel. One king will rule them all. No longer will they be divided into two nations or into two kingdoms. Now, when the Jews read these Old Testament passages, what were they thinking? The earthly nation of Israel. Man, this is going to be great. We've had the cruel rulership of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the Greek Seleucid Empire ruler. They had the Romans come in and they gave them a lot of concessions, but they're cruel. They're awful. We hate them. You know, Pontius Pilate was the governor who killed Jesus. We want a new king. And they're looking, they're waiting. And then this rabbi from Nazareth comes on the scene, Nazareth of Galilee, and starts saying things like, I'm the Son of God. I'm the Son of Man. I'm the fulfillment of what Moses wrote about and talked about. And does he look like a warrior? Does he talk like a king? Is he coming to establish an earthly kingdom? And so what did the people do? What did the leaders do? The Pharisees and Sadducees? They rejected him. Were these prophecies talking about an earthly kingdom? I don't think they were. I think they're talking about the church. I think they're all talking about us. And that's why we're looking at these passages, because they're about us. There will be a new Davidic king. They were waiting for that king. And in the New Testament, that king has come. Matthew 1 tells us Jesus is the descendant of David the king. The temple, I just got one passage here on the temple. Isaiah 2 is one great example of people talking about how the temple is going to be the center of the world, as it were. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's house, that's talking about the temple, will be the highest of all, the highest point of all, the most important place on earth. It will be raised above the other hills, and people from all over the world will stream there to worship. Is that talking about the literal city of Jerusalem? Is that talking about the literal temple of Zion? Or is this talking about the church? All nations will flow to it. You know, in the book of Acts, Jewish people struggled with that at first, but then they realized, that's what God has been talking about. Atonement for sin. Look no further than the first two verses of the second half of Isaiah. Isaiah 1 through 39 is the first half. Isaiah 40 starts with these words, comfort, comfort my people. And then this is how verse 2 ends. The Lord has punished her twice over for all her sins. Israel has already paid for their sins 2 times over. It's time to comfort my people. Isaiah 40 starts the second half of Isaiah. What is the last chapter in the book of Isaiah? The end of the second half, is Isaiah 66, verse 13, and you have a repeat of comfort, comfort. Comfort, comfort my people. At the end of Isaiah, the second half, I will comfort you there in Jerusalem as a mother comforts her children. Everybody's coming back home forever. And you're going to have God as your king. You're going to have the Messiah as your king. Atonement for sin continues in Isaiah 53. I have verses 7 and 8 on the screen. Where are these verses quoted in the New Testament? Those two verses on the screen, Isaiah 53, 7 through 8, are quoted in Acts chapter 8, 32 and 33. Who's doing the talking? Or what's going on in Acts 8, the latter part of Acts 8? Philip is talking to the Gentile, the Ethiopian eunuch, or maybe he was a Jew proselyted in Ethiopia. What about sin? It's very specific in verse 11. He will bear all their sins. Verse 12. He bore the sins of many. So the people are also waiting for a resurrection. There's not a lot we're told about the Hebrew understanding of resurrection. You know, David one time said, he cannot come to me, but I can go to him, talking about his dead son. But here's a passage that indicates this idea of resurrection. There he will remove the cloud of gloom, the shadow of death that hangs over the earth. This one's a little more specific, Isaiah 26, 19. Those who die in the Lord will live. Their bodies will rise again. Those who sleep in the earth will rise up and sing for joy, for your life-giving light will fall like dew on your people. That reminds me of a couple of passages. One is Revelation 14, verse 13. Blessed are those who die in the Lord. It also reminds me of the dead in Christ. Those who are in union with Christ, they will rise again. Probably the most famous passage from the Old Testament about resurrection is Ezekiel 37. You remember the valley of dry bones? And God asks the prophet, he says, Son of man, can these bones live? And Ezekiel says, I don't know. You know. And what starts to happen? I never remember that song. The what bone is connected to the other bone, and the other bone is connected to the other bone, and these bones just start coming together. And then they have flesh, sinews, joints, and then you have this mighty army. It's a vision. It's a vision of physical Israel? I don't think so. I think he's talking about spiritual Israel, and this is the same chapter that we quoted from earlier that talked about one king shall rule them all, and they will be one nation, no longer divided. And then this is what it all leads to. The Messiah has come. The Messiah is here. And here's a passage, Isaiah 61, 1 and 2, as we're moving to our last little bit. What is the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord going to do to his anointed one, the Messiah? He is going to bring good news to the poor. What's another way to translate those two words, good news? He's going to bring the gospel to the poor. These verses are not quoted in Matthew, but they are quoted by Jesus in Luke 4. Do you remember when Jesus was in that synagogue in Nazareth, and he opens the scroll and he starts reading, and he says, oh, by the way, this passage is fulfilled right here, right now. And the people went, yay, the Messiah, the King. What do? They tried to throw him off a cliff and kill him. Oh. But Jesus is here, and he's not going to go. So Matthew 1 through 17 has the genealogy. 3 really important verses are Matthew 1, 21 through 23. You're going to name this person Jesus, this baby Joseph. You're not the birth father, but you're going to name him Jesus, which means Savior. And then he says, you're going to give him another name, Emmanuel, which means God is with us. Jesus went back to heaven. Is he still with us? On the occasion of his ascension, the last verse of Matthew's gospel says, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Do you remember in 1 Peter 1, verse 1, how Peter addresses his audience? He says, you are sojourners and exiles. We are living in exile. And we are waiting to go to our home. So we're there, but we're not there. We enjoy a relationship with Jesus now, and yet there's still a lot yet unfulfilled. I would love to develop this into a short series. So this is my last lesson for Sunday morning in the summer quarter. Next week, Larry will be starting on Titus. There's lesson 1 already out there in the foyer. And then Rob on September 7th, officially in the new quarter, he will start with Ezra and Nehemiah. I wish we had a little more time for comments, but I ran out of time. I hope this was an interesting study, and I hope to revisit with you again in the future. Thank you.